In the soft glow of dawn, as the majestic gates of the palace stood tall and silent, a royal guard on his routine patrol noticed something unusual. Nestled near the ornate iron bars was a little girl, her small frame wrapped in a thin, worn blanket. She was fast asleep, her tiny face peaceful despite the chilly morning air. The guard paused, his heart heavy with questions. Who was she? How did she end up here, of all places? As he approached, he couldn't shake the mix of curiosity and concern swirling in his chest. This wasn't just a lost child. Something about her presence felt deeply out of place. Gently waking her, he asked where she was from, and her response left him speechless. Her voice, soft but resolute, carried a story that unraveled a truth he could never have imagined. What he discovered next shattered his composure and brought tears to his eyes, a moment so raw and profound it would change everything for both of them. Why was this little girl at the palace gates? And what was her secret that moved a royal guard to tears? Stay tuned to uncover a tale of resilience, heartbreak, and an unexpected twist that will touch your heart. The guard knelt beside the girl, trying to steady his voice as he asked her name. Amara, she replied softly, her wide eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and something else, something deeper. She looked no older than 7 or 8, her small hands clutching the edges of her tattered blanket as though it was the only thing keeping her grounded. When he asked how she ended up at the palace gates, her answer was hesitant. Mama told me to wait here. She said someone would help. The words were simple, but they carried an unbearable weight. The guard's mind raced. Why would a mother leave her child in such a vulnerable place? His instinct was to ask more, but he could sense the fear behind her silence, the hesitation in her downcast eyes. The girl's shoes were caked with dirt, her dress too thin for the cold, but her composure struck him. She wasn't crying or begging for help, she just waited. As the guard took a deep breath, his gaze drifted to a small piece of paper poking out of her blanket. He gently pulled it free, unfolding it to reveal a message that would change everything. The words made his heart stop. The guard's hands trembled as he read the note. The handwriting was shaky, as if written in haste, but the words were clear. Asterisk, please keep my daughter safe. I had no other choice. She deserves a chance. Asterisk, no signature, no explanation. Just a plea, desperate and haunting. He looked back at Amara, who sat quietly, her expression unreadable, but her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. Hope, perhaps. Or fear. He wanted to ask more, but it was clear she didn't know much, or maybe she wasn't ready to say. His thoughts raced. Who was her mother? Why would she abandon her child here, of all places? The palace gates were not a sanctuary for the lost. They were a barrier to a world of privilege far removed from struggles like these. And yet, here was this little girl, carrying a secret that seemed bigger than both of them. As he stood there, another guard approached, his stern expression softening when he saw Amara. "What's going on?" he asked, eyeing the note. The first guard hesitated. Sharing the truth could change everything. But keeping it quiet felt wrong. Somewhere, someone was risking everything for this child, and they had no idea why. The first guard hesitated, clutching the note tightly, as if holding on to the fragile trust of a mother he had never met. He glanced back at Amara, who now looked up at him with quiet anticipation. "It's complicated," he finally replied, choosing his words carefully. But his fellow guard wasn't convinced, his sharp gaze falling on the note. "If there's something I need to know, you better tell me." The tension between them hung in the air as the first guard decided to buy more time. "Let's get her inside first," he said, motioning toward the palace gates. The second guard, skeptical but unwilling to argue in front of the child, reluctantly agreed. As they stepped through the towering gates, Amara's small frame seemed even more out of place against the grandeur of the palace courtyard. Once inside, Amara clung to her blanket, her wide eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. The first guard knelt beside her again, lowering his voice. "Amara, do you know where your mother is?" She shook her head, tears finally welling up in her eyes. "She said she'd come back, but I waited all night." Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor. Both guards turned sharply, and Amara instinctively shrank back. The source of the noise became clear as a man in a crisp suit appeared, flanked by palace staff. His expression was stern. "What is going on here? And why is there a child inside the palace?" The guards exchanged tense glances. The first guard stepped forward, trying to shield Amara. She was left at the gate. "There's a note." Before he could finish, the man raised a hand to silence him. He scanned Amara, then the note, his face growing darker with every passing second. "What you've stumbled into is far more complicated than you realize," the man said quietly, his voice heavy with meaning. "That child, she's not just any child." He hesitated, as though weighing the consequences of what he was about to say. Then, leaning closer, he added in a near whisper, "She might be the key to exposing a secret the palace has kept hidden for years." The guard's breath caught at the man's words. Amara, still clutching her blanket, seemed unaware of the storm brewing around her. The man in the suit motioned for the guards to follow him, his tone sharp. "This isn't the place to discuss this. Bring the child." Now. The group moved quickly through the palace halls, their steps echoing off marble floors. Amara's small hand slipped into the guard's, and he gave it a reassuring squeeze. As they entered a private chamber, the man closed the doors behind them, ensuring no one could overhear. Turning to face the guards, he held up the note. "This isn't just a plea for help. It's a warning." The guard frowned. "A warning about what?" The man hesitated before speaking, his voice low and deliberate. The girl's mother, she wasn't just desperate. She knew something dangerous. If this note made it to the wrong hands, it could spark a scandal that would shake the royal family to its core. The guard's heart raced. "What are you saying? How does Amara fit into all of this?" The man's gaze softened as he looked at the girl. She's more than just an innocent child. Her existence, her very identity, is tied to a secret the royal family has fought to bury for years. And now that she's here, everything could unravel. Before the guard could process the weight of those words, there was a loud knock at the door. A voice from the other side called out urgently, "We've got a situation. Someone's demanding to speak with the palace about the girl." The man's face darkened. It's already starting. The tension in the room was palpable as the man in the suit nodded to the guards. "Stay with the girl." "I'll handle this," he said, striding toward the door. But before he could open it, Amara spoke, her small voice cutting through the silence. "It's her," she said softly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Mama's here." The man froze, turning to her in disbelief. "What do you mean? How do you know?" "She promised she'd come back for me," Amara whispered, her voice trembling. "She always keeps her promises." The door swung open, revealing a disheveled woman standing in the corridor, her face pale but determined. Her eyes locked onto Amara, and in that instant, the guard knew this was her mother. The woman clutched another piece of paper, which she held out toward the man in the suit. "I had no choice," she said, her voice cracking. "I had to bring her here. She's the king's daughter." The room fell into stunned silence. The guard looked at Amara, then back at the woman, struggling to process what he'd just heard. The man in the suit, however, seemed unsurprised. "You shouldn't have come back," he said coldly. You've put her in even greater danger." The woman's hands shook as she replied, "You think I don't know that?" But the truth was going to come out eventually. They deserve to know who she is. She turned to the guard, her eyes pleading. "You've seen her kindness, her strength. She's not just a secret to hide. She's meant for something greater." Before anyone could respond, the sound of distant footsteps grew louder, echoing through the halls. More palace guards were approaching, their intentions unclear. The man in the suit swore under his breath. "They're coming for her. If they find her, they'll make sure no one ever learns the truth." The first guard stepped forward, his resolve hardening. "Then we don't let that happen." In the chaos that followed, the guard helped Amara and her mother escape through a hidden passage, the man in the suit reluctantly aiding them. As they disappeared into the night, the guard realized the weight of his decision. He hadn't just saved a child. He had helped ignite a truth that could reshape the kingdom. And as the palace grew smaller in the distance, Amara turned to him with a small, hopeful smile. "Thank you," she said. The guard nodded, knowing their journey was far from over, and the real story was just beginning. The quiet of the forest surrounded them as they stopped to catch their breath. Amara clung to her mother, her small frame finally relaxing now that they were safe for the moment. The guard stood nearby, his thoughts racing. He had sworn an oath to protect the palace, yet tonight he had chosen to protect something far more precious, a child's future. Amara's mother turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude and regret. "I never wanted to bring you into this," she said. "But you've given us a chance I never thought we'd have." The guard nodded, his voice steady. "She deserves to grow up free, not as someone's secret. You'll need to stay hidden for a while, but I'll do what I can to make sure the truth reaches the right people." As dawn began to break, they parted ways. Amara waved at him with a small, hopeful smile. For the first time, she looked like a child unburdened by fear. The guard returned to the palace, knowing his actions had set something in motion. He couldn't predict what the future would hold, but one thing was certain. Amara's story would not be forgotten. It was only the beginning of something far greater.